So it requires a certain amount of What's going on, guys? Sam Brown here at Elite FTS, going over the RDL, the stiff leg deadlift, what the hell is the difference with those, and how you implement them into your program. All right, here we go. I'm here with Alex, and we're going to be going over the Romanian deadlift versus the stiff leg deadlift. I'm sure a lot of people have done this video before, but we're going to add our little Elite FTS flair to it. So today, what I want to demonstrate is what the Romanian deadlift is, what the stiff-legged deadlift is, and who they're the most appropriate for, and when you want to put them into your program. So, first and foremost, Romanian deadlift. It's very different than the stiff-leg deadlift because of one major factor. First and foremost, where you start the lift. So, let's demonstrate the Romanian deadlift, which starts actually at the top. All right, so you can start it from the floor, but what you'll find is that a lot of people will start it in a squat rack up on the pins. So we'll pick up the bar.
Just conventional.
Yep, just conventional. So this is the starting position for a Romanian deadlift. You are starting from the top down. So a couple key facts with the Romanian deadlift. What we really want to focus in on is not just turning this into a conventional deadlift where you just hover over the ground. We want to really focus in on putting more emphasis and force into those hamstrings and into the glutes. So what that means is that you'll more than likely be bringing this bar down your thighs, but not letting your knees come forward over the bar like a normal deadlift. So we don't want to see those knees coming over that bar. What we instead want to focus in on is keeping the straight up and down shin angle, or as close to vertical on the shin angle as we can, emphasizing the hips going backwards, forcing all of that load into those hamstrings, and then squeezing the glutes, firing those hips through to complete that lockout. So you can rest. So that RDL, like I said, starts from the top down. That's opposing the stiff-legged deadlift. Stiff-legged deadlift is going to look more like a regular conventional deadlift, but what you're focusing in on is your hip position. Your hips are going to be a little bit higher than they would normally. Again, trying to keep that vertical shin angle as much as we can. Again, putting that emphasis on the hamstrings and the glutes. So let's demonstrate this. So just show them your regular starting position for a conventional deadlift. As you can see, the knees are coming past the arms, right? So for him personally, I would probably have him go just about even with the arms for a regular conventional deadlift. So you can bring them forward a little bit, right there. That's perfect. So again, this is a normal conventional deadlift position. He gets more leg drive. He gets a little bit of the quads into that movement as well. And he gets a little bit of that stretch reflex at the bottom. What we really want to focus in on is shifting those hips a little bit higher, straightening the legs a little bit. So a misconception with the stiff-legged deadlift is that your legs need to be perfectly straight. Not necessarily the case. It'll be different for everybody. You are looking for a stiff leg, a stiffer than normal leg. So let's demonstrate that. So go into your normal setup, and I will just correct for the stiff-legged deadlift version. So if that's his normal position, what I want, hips a little higher. Starting there. You're noticing his back is now parallel to the ground. What we want to focus in on, and if you check out my video on pull-ups, which is as to why pull-ups are such a really good tool in determining if you're ready for a deadlift, is that he's going to put so much stabilization and force into those lats, and in order to do this correctly, you need to make sure that your shoulders and your lats are stable enough to hold that weight. So let's go to the bottom again. So again, a stiff-legged deadlift. What you're looking to do, you're looking to keep that shin angle straight up and down. That bar is going to be a little bit farther away from you than a normal deadlift, right? Thinking about driving those feet into the ground, stabilizing those shoulder blades down and back, driving the hips through, and getting a ton of awesome tension and force going through those hamstrings, as well as those glutes. So a couple things about the RDL versus the stiff-legged deadlifts. When do you want to implement them into your program? RDLs and stiff-legged deadlifts should be a secondary movement. I wouldn't consider them a main movement for a day, especially if your goal is to get better at the deadlift. If your goal is not to get better at the deadlift and it's to develop stronger hamstrings or more aesthetic hamstrings, I would incorporate them as a main move for bodybuilders. But again, I'm talking to those that want to get better at deadlifting specifically. So the idea should be after your main deadlift work, drop down the weight and work on your RDLs or your stiff legs. Now, how do you pick, right? So if you're a newer lifter, I would stay away from stiff-legged deadlifts for the most part. I would use the stiff-legged deadlift as a more advanced version of the RDL. Why? Well, first and foremost, the stiff-legged deadlift, if done incorrectly, just turns into a shitty deadlift, which is not good for anybody. So it requires a certain amount of prerequisite mobility and stability and competency in utilizing your lats to stabilize, utilizing a good proper brace, and to be able to really control your body through the full movement. So again, I would not suggest doing stiff leg deadlifts for a beginner. On the other hand, if you are a beginner and you want to get better at deadlifting and you want to have an accessory that you can utilize, you can easily do RDLs with dumbbells, which again, I would suggest if you are more of a beginner. So RDL versus stiff leg deadlift in terms of weight, in terms of percentage, in terms of when to program it, why to program it. If you are keeping the idea of wanting to get stronger at the main movement, which is your deadlift, I would focus in on keeping the reps fairly low. When I say fairly low, I don't mean singles. I don't give a shit. No one gives a shit what your stiff-legged 1 rep max is, because that's stupid. And if we're trying to train to get better at something, we're trying to minimize the amount of stupid that is in our programming. So I would focus in on reps 5 to 8, keeping the weight a little bit moderate. Again, with a stiff-legged deadlift, you're going to be utilizing less weight anyway. The position you're finding yourself in is less than ideal, and it's going to be impossible for you to lift more stiff-legged than you would with a normal conventional stance. Again, same thing for RDLs. I would focus in on utilizing that exercise for what it needs to be utilized for, forcing you into certain positions and forcing you to stabilize throughout those certain ranges of motion. And again, you're not touching the ground with that RDL. You are in a position where your personal anatomy and your ability to stabilize is going to be the limiting factor to how much weight you can use. If you're starting from the top, you're going to have that eccentric portion of loading those hamstrings, but for most people, you'll find that there's a point where they start rounding over. So the RDL should be utilized to essentially get you stronger in those positions over the course of time, but without having you compromise those positions due to shitty form, too much weight, ego lifting, and all that other stupid shit that we see on the internet. So, to put it simply, RDLs and stiff-legged deadlifts are secondary movements. Think of them as the pause squat or pause benches or tempo squat, tempo benches for the deadlift, right? You're putting yourself in a disadvantageous position in order to better maneuver through your normal deadlift. Thank you very much for checking out this video, guys. I hope you appreciated it. I hope you learned something new about stiff-legged deadlifts or Romanian deadlifts. What I think you should do next is check out my pull-up video to see how you can better utilize your lats and your scaps to get more out of your pull-ups and actually even get more out of your deadlifts.